Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the furore over the BBC's Question Time, yet again putting entertainment ahead of information by allowing an audience member to go on a 90-second racist diatribe without ever pulling her up on her false statements. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So let's go through her statements one by one. She begins with 68 million people now living in England and going up according to UN estimates. So the first thing to note here is referring to UN estimates. So that means she's read a thing because she's referring to the UN. She's read a thing, except there aren't 68 million people living in England. There aren't even 68 million people living in the whole of the UK. In England, there are 56 million. And if you looked that up on the UN websites, it would say the same. The UN is not wrong on this. So what does that tell us? Tells us she's referring to the UN, but she hasn't got her information from the UN. And this is a classic problem with people in general, but in particular, Britain has suffered from this in the past few years. People quoting so-called facts and citing a credible organisation that they themselves did not get the fact from. She'll have read it from somewhere, of course she will. She'll have read it from some Brexit group's page, but that's not what she cited. She didn't say, according to leave.eu or something like that. So immediately, she doesn't understand or care about fact checking. So she's gullible. So we've begun with her basing her points on a false statement of fact, which was not pulled up. So then next up, she says, at what stage do the panel and people think this country has had enough? That we should close the borders completely. Oh, nice one, nice one. So then we don't have anything like enough food to eat because we get a lot of it from abroad. We only produce 50% of our own food, and some of that, I don't know how much, whether it's a lot or a relatively small amount, but some of it at least requires ingredients to come from abroad to be able to make it. So she wants us to starve, first of all. Next, we import the raw materials needed to drive what little industry we still have, including for power generation. So she wants us to do without electricity too. In fact, let's not go through these one by one. Let's cut to the chase. She wants us to go back to the Stone Age. She wants us to be cavemen again. Okay. Only our population is a bit too large to sustain ourselves in such an inefficient system of living. And also, I don't really want to go back to caveman days. It's not very nice. So basically, she's advocating the extinction of Britons and certainly the end of the British way of life. So what does this tell us about her? That she not only doesn't bother to check really simple facts, she's gullible, but that she has no intellectual capacity to consider the consequences of what she's saying. And I don't mean consequences that aren't readily evident. There's a lot of things about Brexit, to do with international relationships of all kinds, diplomatic relationships, trade relationships, whatever, that are not obvious. We don't expect the majority of people in the country to understand it. Of course not. We don't need to. We have people who take care of those things. But I'm talking about really, really obvious ones. She doesn't have the intellectual capacity to do that. Do you know what she reminded me of? She reminded me when I was watching some Flat Earthers one, and this one woman said about, she was a flat earther. At first I was hesitant, and then what I did is I walked along a beach, and then I was totally convinced the earth was flat. It's that level of thinking. It's that level. It hurts my brain to try and think like that. Then she said, because it's got to the stage where there's no education, the schooling, infrastructure, it's enough, we are sinking. This is something you see a lot of, just random statements thrown out. If anyone actually sat there and asked her, what do you mean by all that? She wouldn't have a clue. What do you mean by infrastructure? In fact, I'm going to bet if you actually asked her, what is infrastructure? She wouldn't know. Again, she's getting this from elsewhere. But, she may have a point about the no education. Certainly she has none. But in terms of the education system in general, 1 out of every 6 teachers in England is from overseas. So she's also arguing for the removal of 1/6 of all the teachers in England, which is actually not enough. We don't have enough teachers here. It's not immediately obvious to me how that helps schools. And before some bonehead tries to say, we're not need as many teachers if we're not teaching foreign kids in classes, there are nowhere near as many in 1 out of 6 of the population from overseas. It's a massive net reduction in teachers, of which we already don't have enough, especially in certain subjects. Right, what cretinous thing did she say next? Oh yeah, says you've got people flooding into this country who cannot speak English. No. You've actually got less than 0.25%. But you know, checking facts is hard. Then, I've come from London. Oh dear. Says, in the NHS, everything is written in different languages. How much is that costing? How much is it costing for all the interpreters? And I'm thinking, well, as far as the cost of the signs, exactly the same. The sign still needs to be there, even if it was only in English, and it costs the same amount. You know, why would it cost more to have extra words on it? The printer prints out what you ask them to print out. The cost is based on colours, material, and the finish of the sign. As for interpreters, like I said, it's a tiny proportion. The people in this country who don't speak a word of English, not residents, they're visitors, tourists. And I'm sure she speaks no languages other than English. Next, she'll be moaning about signs in Welsh in Wales, I suppose. The next one was an absolute peach at first. I nearly fell off my chair. She says, what sort of country is allowing this tourism to come in? Oh, before, thankfully, she got to the next bit. Is she asking why we encourage tourism? Why we encourage people to visit, spend money, generate jobs? I mean, I knew she was thick by this point, but come on. But no, she was talking about health tourism. She actually said she believes there's people from abroad go, oh, let's go to Britain so I can have this operation, or I can have my... She said, babies! People come to Britain just to have their babies and then leave, as if that'd be free. It's like, where's this free place they're staying in this country while they wait weeks for their baby to come? And also, just this general idea, this health tourism is again a myth pushed by Brexiteers. You know, when you have NHS treatment, it's paid for by your own country. Even like with EU members, when EU citizens come, it's still their own country that pays for it. That's why you have to fill in forms when you get the treatment, so they know who to bill. Of course, they don't leave you to die. If you're bleeding to death, they don't go, where are you from? Or you don't seem to be saying, we better leave them there. No, of course not. What sort of heartless bastard would do that? But the idea of getting treatment for non-life-threatening conditions, this health tourism, is a complete myth. Not that I'm opposed to some basic courtesy in terms of treating people who are guests in our country, you know, letting them, for example, survive the trip to our country. But yet again, no understanding of the realities. And seriously, I'm sorry, but seriously, when Brexiteers get all uppity when we call them thick, have you seen, even if you are not, have you seen who's on your side? This is who's on your side. And it's a classic case of what we've had to put up with for the past few years, particularly those of us who are not as dense as this. Yes, these people existed before, they always have, and they exist in all countries. This isn't Britain, this is everywhere. But there was a time in this country, just like there already is a time in many other countries, where these people are shut down very quickly as soon as they pipe up. And then they very quickly learn, even people of this low intellectual calibre, they learn to shut up. You know, Fiona Bruce, the show's host, did nothing at any point, not during, not after. Didn't pull her up on blatantly false statements that she must have known were false. The only heartening thing about the entire shameful episode for me was that not a single member of the audience applauded her. And this is quite common before. You can get people saying the stupidest things and you'll get a bit of a clap. Nothing, not a sausage. And those who sat around her looked bloody uncomfortable as well. There was at least a demonstration that she does not represent the views of this country. And I hope that came across to some. But I know how these things work. The reports will say that a British woman goes on an ill-informed racist rant. Not British audience refuses to support racist rants. That's not how these things are reported. And in the same week that Germany's Merkel was saying that racism is a poison, we had this, and we had our own Prime Minister refusing to say that black people are not intellectually inferior to white people. Going to take a long time for my country to recover from things like this. But anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.